When I think of self-care, I like to think of a river. And so with a river, we have things like the sources that go into that river. So rivers have things like springs, lakes, snow melt. I see these things as kind of your foundational practices. So things like sleep, hydration, nourishment, movement, the things that if we fill this bucket will help the flow of the rest of our practices, and it will establish a strong flow from the beginning. And I also, in these foundational practice, I would include things like creating a generative inner environment, like we were talking about the other day. Maybe your formal supporting practices, like a morning routine, seated meditation, yoga or journaling, and also having empowered connections. I think that has been one of the most meaningful things that has helped me create that generative inner environment as having those empowering connections. And so when we feed the source of our self care river, we'll already have a strong flow to our river. And then you have things like tributaries that come off and also feed the river. And I see these as like your supportive or supplemental practices, the things that really resource you. And I could see things like replenishment or reset. So maybe this is your downtime or a vacation, or maybe it's a hobby, something that inspires you that you're doing regularly, or even working purposefully or having a purpose behind your work. And also being intentional about your uplifting connections. So making sure you're prioritizing the connections in your world. So I would see these as those supplemental and supporting practices that also feed into your river of self-care. And then we can do practices that will support us in establishing strong banks to our river to keep us flowing in the direction we want to flow. So these will be your strong banks. And these I see as things like living in alignment with your authenticity, with your core values and beliefs, establishing and holding boundaries, gaining additional self-awareness that helps you kind of live in that alignment, easing the process of committing to your self-care and your well-being. So kind of that commitment piece, reducing any unnecessary stresses that you don't need in your life, and also ways to manage your stresses. So creating those strong banks with those types of practices. And then, of course, we'll often get some obstructions in our rivers. These might be like rocks or a tree falls in our river. These are like those unexpected life experiences or life events that we didn't see coming that kind of throw us off our game, challenges, grief, healing, challenging people or relationships. So these might come and change the flow of our river, but the water still can move around it because it has all of these additional practices. It can be adaptable and resilient and find a way through and around. And often with obstacles in a river, you'll often find an eddy right behind that obstacle. And so I see these as moments of rest and recovery. So this will be like your eddy that is just a temporary flow that goes maybe in a slower pace than the rest of the river. it doesn't stop, so it's not stagnant, but it is a place where you can rest and find solace in. And you'll often find these in various parts of our river. So we can have eddies anywhere along the way where we can have these micro practices that help bring us back to the present moment, help us rest and rejuvenate. And so, with all of these, your flow continues and creates a really empowered flow of self care, of well being. So, this is kind of the outcome of all of these small pieces put together. And then once in a while, I won't have it here on this page, but once in a while, your river can turn into a waterfall where you feel that wonderful sense of freedom and beauty. And we can really relish in those moments when we find those. And so, this empowered flow, I see something as being aware, connected, adaptable, resilient, and it lives in harmony with its surroundings. So, that is the power of self care. It can bring all of those things forward for us.